Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we cultivate virtue to bring it to our home and yours. I'm Thomas McCuddy.
I'm Thomas Quackenbush.
And I'm Nick Wiegand. Gentlemen, tonight we are going to be talking about integrity and virtue and the relationship in between. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation because if you were to ask my kids from a very young age, integrity is one of the words that they can define the quickest.
Mhm.
And I'm going to put out what my definition for them was their entire lives. It's always doing the right thing, even when nobody is watching.
Mhm.
So I'm going to throw that to your more technical, mind and kind of just bounce that definition off of you. Maybe you can define it better, maybe more appropriate.
So, I think when we talk about somebody having integrity, and I think we immediately move towards, doing the right thing when nobody is watching. And so this question
The key is
initially,
even.
even,
My grandkids do this too. Even when nobody,
even when
so it's
nobody's
all the time, but
even when
like,
nobody's watching,
yeah, okay.
but then the question was, well, how does that distinguish from virtue? Because virtue is when you are doing the right thing, even when nobody's watching.
Mhm.
Like it's who you are. It's a part of who and what you are. So then I started asking myself the question: can a person have integrity in the sense that they are consistent with their principles? Because again, the whole idea is you're not one person one time and another person
Mhm.
another time. But wouldn't we then say that a person who, if they have the wrong ideas or they misunderstand what's actually good, that they could have integrity in the sense that they are consistent according to their principles, but they may not actually be living the good life?
Well, give me an example.
Okay, so well, for example, I would say this is where, and as we talk about politics and we talk about living out what we believe is the good life,
Sure.
that I would say that with people with whom I disagree politically and even morally, I view them as people of integrity because they are consistent.
And following through with what they say.
They follow through with what they say. They genuinely believe and they live it out, even when people are not watching.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, but I would not call them virtuous because virtue requires actually doing the good,
Right.
knowing the good. Okay, now I know people would say, well, to them they're being virtuous. Well, I get that, but there's a sense I can look at the person, and even when I completely disagree with with what they call good, I can genuinely call them a person of integrity
Mhm.
because they have that consistency. They're not a hypocrite. They
Okay.
genuinely live that out. So I
Well, I want
think
to argue with the person who even says to them they're being virtuous because virtue is either good or it is not. It's not. It is never a matter of perspective or opinion, and so just like truth, it is corresponds to reality. It is, and so virtue is either good or not.
right,
So we can't. I don't even want to let that kind of statement even sit there for a minute.
right. Well,
Is that virtue is not something we've created. It is
Yeah.
not something that we make up. It's not ideas that just came out of thin air. It's the good that has been discovered.
Yep.
correct, and I do agree, and that's why when it comes to is a person virtuous, I can look at them and I can say, well, according to what is actually good, I'm looking and I'm seeing something different. But at the same time, I could call them a person of integrity because even though they're doing what I would believe is wrong and doing what, let's go with even against scripture. Like the scripture says, hey,
Sure.
don't do
Yeah.
this, and they do that thing, but they're consistent. It goes back to if they genuinely believe that, there's a sense that the way I kind of thought of it is virtue is the larger bubble. You think of two circles. Virtue contains everything that's good, and integrity is that aspect of your character that is stable, that is driving, that keeps you from being, in that sense, tossed to and fro. That you're going to live those things out consistently. Um, and so that's why I think what comes up is we tend to focus on integrity, but if we don't have the virtue, then you can be consistently bad.
Yeah.
You
And
can.
so, well, I'm gonna bring the verse into it at this
Okay.
point because I think this is where that the verse fits incredibly well. So the verse is Psalm 25:21, and he writes, "May integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait for you." And he's talking to God. And so, I had never thought of integrity this way. So the fact that integrity is coupled with uprightness, well, let's define what the psalmist means by uprightness.
Mm-hmm.
But see, I think that's where your aspect of virtue comes into play.
That is it, right? That
That's
is the good. So the uprightness would be the true, the good, and the beautiful. Like
Yeah.
that is what is good, right? So he's saying coupling that, which is what you're saying,
right.
coupling that with integrity. So they should be married together, and they're married together in Scripture. But yeah, I think they can be separate.
So let's ask this question: is there a way that you could be virtuous without integrity?
Virtuous without integrity.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't. I don't think so, because by nature being. I mean, I think that would, if you ask the question the other way around, can you have integrity without virtue? I would say yes, because that's what we're talking about. I don't think it works the way you phrased it, or you way you asked that question. But I think as I'm thinking about it too, I think there is that distinction, because it's just kind of like when we talk about justice, and we brought that up a few episodes ago, we say that there is, like, the way we understand justice is contrary to the way the world sees it. Even directionally, we say that we give to others what is owed, and the world says we'll just take what's owed to us, and kind of has that. And I think the same thing is true of, like, we could talk about integrity, and then, like, say biblical or godly integrity, because the integrity is before God, and not before, the people that can, whatever ideology that people are adhering to. That's just an ideology.
I don't know what you mean by the integrity is before God.
Like we're being, like, our integrity is like it's we're our the ultimate, the person that we are ultimately being,
So the ultimate arbiter,
yeah, like
being God,
yeah, so he's there, and when we're saying
he's
that,
the one we owe the integrity to.
yes.
Okay.
And I think, like what you were saying earlier, that is, even when no one's watching, well, as Christians, we know that God's always watching, not in, not kind of like Santa Claus type of way, but in that he's omnipresent, that he is omniscient, that he has these qualities that, as we come to understand, he's there, and so obviously when we're living with integrity, we, as a Christian, we are recognizing that every moment of our lives we're before God. And I think that's a good place. And I mean, the psalmists, like, you see it throughout. It's recognition that they're before God, and this is how they're speaking with Him, and sometimes they're pleading with Him or whatever. But I think that's what distinguishes it. And as you brought up
Well,
over,
this particular verse is him actually pleading with God,
yeah,
but saying, "In the meantime, as I wait, my integrity and uprightness will
because
preserve me. Will get me through it."
because if you have a worldly system, like, what's going to keep you if that worldly system breaks down? Like, what's going to keep you, if you're, like, say if your whole life is about building some business, or, that's become you're associating yourself with that business, or, with your marriage, or with whatever. If that ever fails, then every bit of you falls apart with it. Your integrity falls, everything falls. But the only way we can remain steadfast, and we talk about that with with fortitude, to have courage and other things to go forward, we recognize that God is eternal. He's outside of time and space, and he's always the same. As everything else changes in chaos around us, he doesn't change, and that's why we direct our everything, our whole soul, our body, our mind, to him, because he's the one that's going to remain when everything else, you know, goes to an end.
Okay, so you asked a question, so I'm actually this has potential to devolve into one of our other types of conversations. It turns into. So I'm going to apologize to everyone listening if it does. But you asked the question: Can you have can you be virtuous without integrity? So my question then becomes: Is the idea of being virtuous, does that have to be an all or nothing thing? Like, if you lack in any virtue, are you therefore not virtuous? Because if that's the case, if it's an all or nothing thing, then no. But if it's not an all or nothing thing, if there are gradients, then sure, you can still have integrity and not. So when you say the words, "Can you be virtuous?" Does that mean all or nothing?
Well, no one is perfect, and that's one thing that we're always clear about. So virtue is always something that we're cultivating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, the question then becomes,
Can
as
I be
we're
cultivating it and then apathetic and doing nothing, which would be a lack of integrity when I'm not doing anything, and yet still be more virtuous than not? I mean, what's the scale of me being Nick the Virtuous?
well, and that's
That's my
because
night name now, by the
oh,
way.
that's your night.
That's now.
Nice,
Yes.
nice.
Huh?
So, and this is why we teach this because again, we're trying to teach our children many times, and just kind of like you
And I'm the
mentioned.
same thing as a
Yeah,
child. So
yeah. So there we go. So, you said is we're trying to teach our children, and there is a sense also we as adults we're also trying to grow in this that
Mm.
none of us have perfect integrity, none of us have perfect virtue, but there is this sense, and this is why I asked that question because sometimes people will try to isolate the various virtues. Well, I'm really good over here, but I'm just going to let this other side go. Without getting into the larger discussion, there's a sense all the qualities hinge together
well, but there's a
because,
difference between letting it go and being weak.
right, well, and that's why there's a sense as we grow in those other characteristics, it helps us in our weakness, it helps in our weak area. So this is why when I ask this question about integrity, because as we're trying to grow in virtue and we're trying to be more like Christ, and this is what people, we want to be like Christ. And some areas we don't struggle with as much as others, but I think as we're seeking this and kind of like what as you're asking, and it's like, well, if we're strong in one area, but we're weak or we're going to choose to ignore another area, I think that's why, in a sense, we're going to lack integrity. We're not being consistent with what's
Yeah.
truly
So
good.
that's my question. So is
Yeah.
integrity a consistency?
It has.
I mean, so can I have integrity one day and not the other? I feel like then then you don't have so I feel like integrity has to be a consistency thing. A very
I think it's a little more than that. I think it's like a consistency with honesty or something.
Oh no. I mean, I know it's more, but what I'm
Yeah.
saying is
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
it's not a finite temporal like, oh, you had integrity once.
Well, and I think in terms of virtue, is you think about just the habit because it's all about building habits. It's a process, and a part of that is having integrity. Because if we're just trying to be
But virtue is more than habits.
what's that? Yeah, no,
Virtue is more than
yeah, it's more
habits.
than habits, but
They're not
habits.
less than that, though.
Yeah,
I agree. They're
They're-
not less, but they're more.
right. But that's why, as we talk about trying to build this, there's a sense of this gradation that it's not the case that you just kind of turn it on and off, but it's also not the case that
Mm.
okay, today I am, I have integrity and virtue, and this day I don't. We're always moving in that direction, and that's why there is that sense that you can even look at two people and you can say, well, this one has more integrity than the other.
Yeah, see, so as I asked the question, I told you this is going to devolve into one of those conversations. I'm sorry,
Let's go for it.
but I asked the question: is virtue all or nothing? And
Mhm.
the answer to that, I believe, is no. I don't believe because you said there's not perfection. Now the question then becomes: is integrity all or nothing? And I believe the answer to that is yes. You are either a man with integrity or you are not.
yeah,
You either going to you are either going to fold like a house of cards when pressure is applied, or you will stand firm. And then I feel like as soon as you show you are no longer a man of integrity, you are now not a man of integrity. So to me, and I might be wrong, so I'm throwing it out there. Integrity is all or nothing. The idea of being virtuous, if we're gonna, you can boil it down to habits. It's a process. It's like sanctification.
Mhm.
mm.
But integrity, it's either you have it or you don't. You either are or you are not.
Right. And I think that's why, as we ask this question, the value in this, because when you were mentioning, this is something you grilled into your kids, that it's important because I view the integrity as a means by which we're going to cultivate that virtue.
I agree.
Because as you have that integrity with the principles you do have, You live by those. Now, you might need to grow, but you're consistent. You have that honesty. You have that character, and without that integrity, you're never going to cultivate the good habits you need, because habits must be practiced over time. They must be consistently applied, and without that
Yeah,
integrity,
but okay. But how do you know if you have integrity if it's never challenged, right? So integrity, nobody ever says, "Oh, you are a man with integrity," because everything's always like you never go through any hard times. Like people don't say that, right? It only comes up when it's like, "Oh, I see what you did there. That was the hard thing,"
Yeah.
and you could have easily said, no, and saved yourself a whole lot of trouble. You could have just easily told the little white lie, quote unquote.
What?
So,
I'm sorry. Sorry.
hold on.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I knew this was going to happen. So, but my question, you can build that virtue because your question was, can you be virtuous without integrity? And I'm kind of going to lean on the fences. I think you can be, or at least you can move in that direction. I think integrity is. I mean, I think virtue is a hard thing, but I think integrity is when those types of things are challenged,
Yeah.
and you can be virtuous a month and never face a challenge, and nobody's like, "Oh, what a man of integrity," until it's challenged.
well, I think challenge is one aspect where I think the integrity might shine. But even as you go back to the case of Israel, where they failed the most was when things got good. Whenever they've had those
Yeah,
blessings, that's when they failed to live up to. They lacked, in that sense,
that's a good point.
integrity.
Yeah,
So again, there's the trials allow certain characteristics to shine, and so that's why I think, as we consider integrity is in many ways a tool. I would view it as a tool of virtue, because as you learn this integrity, you need content. So this is why I said, if your ideas of morality are bad, you can still be a person of integrity, living those things consistently. So there's a sense that as you learn that integrity and as you grow in those virtues and you learn, okay, this is what justice is, this is what true courage looks like,
Mm-hmm.
this is where I need to be self-controlled. As you learn all of those pieces, there's a sense of virtue is multifaceted, but integrity has kind of one goal, that consistency of
consistency of
character.
okay.
Well,
And so it is much easier to, again, judge that integrity versus the multitude of virtues.
and integrity is interesting too. It's like, because you think about us as pastors, there is a expectation that we have integrity, and we can either prove that we do or we can prove that we don't. And
Well, I
like,
mean,
but
it's qualification
yeah,
in Scripture.
well, that's what I mean. Like that's
Really,
different.
the approach would be integrity,
Because
right?
you think about, so we take the position which is, a position of integrity, and I guess the highest sense of that word, because pastors and should be have the most integrity, but also, like, as you come into that position, as you're being formed into that position, because you don't we're not the same the first day we pastored than we are now, and we'll probably hopefully have more wisdom in the future. And you think about that process, because we're trying to live up to that position, because it's a lofty position, we're not worthy of it, but God called us to that position, and like the virtue is like growing into that place. Like the integrity is something that's expected by the congregation. They don't want to catch you doing something wrong, because then your whole image has been shattered. But for them to see you in a place where no one's watching, and they see you and you're like, wow, that guy, he has integrity. But also, you had to develop virtue to have that integrity, because you're like, okay, this is all the things I need to be doing, and I'm doing it, and I have that
Well,
habit.
I think to be a Christian man or woman, then they absolutely have to go hand in hand.
Yep.
Um,
But I think there the integrity becomes that vehicle, because I think you said it well. You either have it or you don't.
right.
But whereas virtue, we're growing,
Yeah.
and some areas we're going to grow faster, others we're going to struggle more in because of the various natures of our souls and our appetites and the things that we
I think
have.
you can be, but I do think you can be virtuous in nature and don't not have integrity. Like I genuinely think you can. Now, then I think when that failure happens, then you've found where you are weaker, in
Mm.
virtue. So it says the family's a virtue. So I'm gonna kind of turn this back on my daughter. So she doesn't listen to this. I hope I don't know. She might take this wrong, but my daughter is quite capable at pretty much everything she ever does. And she went to college on scholarship to play lacrosse, and her team is getting smoked this year. And there's a part of me as a dad who's super competitive that's like, no, I want to help. Like, that's, that's not good. But there's actually a part of me that is, as this is the part I hope she doesn't hear, mildly grateful that she is experiencing this
Trial.
action. I mean, because it's an actual trial.
Yeah.
Like, it's an actual trial. It's a
So good.
And so I am getting to witness in real time my daughter's integrity, because I didn't know how she would handle this type of frustration and failure and just like, it's brutal. I didn't know how she would face it, but I'm getting to witness her integrity in real life, in real time. And I have to be like, I'm here for you, but kind of deep down, I'm like, I'm actually glad you're facing some adversity
Yeah,
in your
absolutely.
life to test that integrity, to build it. So I don't know if I'm on, I think it's okay. No, I don't think it's okay. I think it's necessary as parents for these tests of integrity and these trials to be there for our kids.
Mm.
Yeah.
And listen to the word itself, because we can talk about the integrity of a building. You can talk about the integrity of a structure. The concepts are related. So when we're discussing integrity in this sense, we're talking about the structure of our character.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the virtue is our character. That is the Christ
I
likeness
mean,
that we wish
a
to
building is
portray.
still a building,
Right.
whether or not it can fall down as soon as a
Right.
wind, a small wind blows. You're right. Yeah, I mean, it
Right.
exists, sure.
And so that integrity is the means by which, as we're growing in these things, such as she's, what you're really wanting to see from her is that fortitude, that ability
Mhm.
to endure. And one of the mechanisms that will make that happen is that integrity, that she realizes, hey, I need to be this way no matter how things shift or shimmy.
Right.
And so I think that's why in bringing this up, it's useful, because I think, again, sometimes we may focus, particularly as we're raising our children, on one side versus the other, when almost like when you build a building, you need to make sure multiple things. You've got your substructure, you've got, the outer structure, you got the foundation, you have all these kinds of pieces. So that's kind of what, in bringing this up, because it was actually my did I get those right? Did I get
Yeah, close enough.
okay, good.
I'm down. I'm like listening to you
I'm
use
not the
construction
contractor.
terminology. Yeah,
I'm not the contractor.
no,
I
it works.
literally read it in a book somewhere, and that's what I was trying to remember very quickly.
I was noticing the
terms that were used.
foundation came much later on. I'm like, I think
Yeah, the foundation should have been first. I got that. But the reason to bring it up again, the question comes up with this
I
as
wasn't making
we
fun of you. I
not
like the terminology.
he's giddy.
as we talk about not just raising our children, but as we also talk about conforming to Christ in our own lives as adults. I think this is why we need to sometimes almost step back, and as we have focused on virtue and we focus on these qualities, that's why it's worth raising up these questions, some of the things that might be underneath the surface that we haven't, like this issue of integrity. So,
Yeah, so as kind of closing out what you're saying, the scripture says that integrity and uprightness will preserve us as we wait upon the Lord. And we all do have those trials. We all do have the tests. So we know deep down if we're men or women of integrity. Like, we know these things. Other people may not know. Other people may think one thing and we know deep down we're the other, but that doesn't put us out. And I think that's kind of what we can identify our weaknesses. It's important to then develop that out for us, and then to continue to develop it out in our families and our children. Gentlemen, I appreciate the conversation as always. Fantastic. You can find us at familiesofvirtue.com, and our podcast Virtuous Roots can be found on all the major streaming platforms. Thank you for the conversation. We'll talk to you next time. God bless.